In this video, I'll be running through how traffic campaigns being launched by an agency arguably spiraled this business into potentially going under over the course of the next few months. Not a very positive way to start a video, but it is the truth. And I think there's a lot to learn here, particularly in the fact that you should not run traffic campaigns. I say this time and time again, I've never seen a conclusive data set that has ever proven that traffic campaigns work. And now I have a really good case study to show you in the actual impact that this has on the P&L. And so let's dive into the account. Let's provide some context. I'll pull up the P&L as well later in the video, and we'll show how this is trailed into financial outcomes. And so this agency took over this account back on August 15th. And so if we take a look at the month before in July, and I just need to change my sort here so that we can see not their campaigns. And what you'll be able to see is this business was spending $109,000 a month on paid media. Now, their direct attributed ROAS in platform, it actually isn't summing here because they had multiple attribution methods running within the account, but it was about at a 2.5 to a 2.8. Now, we can move into the first half of August as well. I can show you what this looked like. You can see attributed ROAS down the bottom here is a 2.89 over here. Across the campaigns, they spent $40,000 in the first half of the month. Now, in comes the agency. So let me sort to just the agency's campaigns. And in the second half of August, a few different campaigns were launched. Now, I can't open up the name of the campaigns or it gives away the agency that was running these, but I can tell you that this is a top-of-funnel traffic campaign. This as well is a top-of-funnel traffic campaign. This as well is a top-of-funnel traffic campaign, and so is this. And then this is a conversion-based campaign. Fantastic. One of the only conversion-based campaigns running in this account, targeting website visitors. And so this is effectively retargeting all of that traffic that's being driven to the website. And you can see attributed ROAS in the platform is actually kind of remaining stable out of the gates in the first period of this being run. Now, the idea of this agency and the pitch that was provided was a really hard focus on new customer acquisition. This business, prior to the agency actually coming in, was already in a bit of a sketchy position. They were declining month on month, and they were looking for a fix. And the agency came in and proposed something that was incredibly logical, which is that there should be more focus on new customer acquisition, because previously in the ad account, there were no exclusions, heavy over-attribution to existing customers, and honestly, too much spend. They were spending $100,000 to $150,000 a month on Meta, but they were only a business doing $500,000 in top line, and 70% of that was returning customer revenue. And so it was so much overspend for the actual new customer revenue that was coming in. And so the pitch here was very, very logical, but the execution was traffic campaigns. And so if we then move into September, we can see spend was sitting at $75,000. Once again, I'll remind you, this is traffic, then conversion-based retargeting here as well as here and here. And then the rest down here are also traffic campaigns. And now you can see this quite obviously just within the CPCs of the campaigns as well as the CTRs. Now, what's happened immediately within a month of launching a heavy traffic campaign strategy is that attributed ROAS has dropped to a 1.6. Now, honestly, I don't really care what attributed ROAS is. Like, MER might be better, profit contribution might be better, the business might be doing better. Attributed ROAS and platform doesn't mean a whole lot. And that was likely the narrative that was pushed here as well, which is like, let's not look at ROAS. The goal here is to drive a bunch of novel people to the website who are not yet warm, and then we're going to put them through this warm-up sequence, and then ultimately they'll convert to a bottom-of-funnel campaign. And so when you run a traffic-based campaign structure like this, the idea, it's more of a branding approach. You're not approaching through direct performance marketing at all, because the idea here is that, well, we're going to drive all these people to the website and then they'll buy eventually. And the logic behind they'll buy eventually is because you won't see attributed performance in your traffic campaigns. You just won't. None of these are profitable. And some of these traffic campaigns are targeting warm audiences too. And so even targeting warm audiences, we're not seeing profitable acquisition on these campaigns. But the argument is, well, eventually these people will buy. Now they're in the sphere, now they're engaging with the website, now they're in our bottom of funnel retargeting campaigns, and they might buy in 1 to 2 months' time, and that's when we'll actually see the lift. And so we can obviously play this exercise out here because this data is very old and we can go way forward in time. We move into October, and unfortunately the agency was fired. due to the performance in revenue and the performance within the P&L. And so this was their effective last 15 days within October, where they spent another $35,000 across these traffic campaigns. Once again, attributed ROAS was a 1.9. Now I just want to look at November, which is the month after. This is obviously back in 2023 as well, this was a really good month for e-commerce. And I just want to see what happened to the numbers when they switched back to their old campaign structure. And so you can see here, they went back up to spending $97,000. So spend actually went back up. Attributive ROAS in platform jumped immediately to a 3.64. Now, I am not a big fan of one-day view-through attribution, which is really going to mess with these numbers. So if we just take a look down at this 7-day click level, they're sitting at about a 2.6. So a considerable better position than what the traffic campaigns were sitting at. Now, they don't have heavy audience exclusions in here. I still don't agree with this account structure at all, but it's probably better than a heavy traffic focus. So let's now jump over into the P&L here, and let's run through what this actually did. And so these were the numbers prior to the agency joining. Their net revenue was, and this is first-time customer P&L, by the way. This isn't total revenue. This is just first-time customers. They had 614,000 in March. This dropped quite heavily in April. It maintained in May. It dropped again in June. And so you can see when the agency took over, they were already in quite a desperate position. New customer revenue had halved within a 4-month period. Now, this is a combination of lacking on the performance marketing front, but also it's a combination of just merchandising. Okay, there was a big merchandising issue here, which effectively people didn't want the new products that were being introduced, which caused a significant decline in demand. And now, in addition to that as well, ad spend was pulled back quite heavily. And so you can see ad spend in row 13 here. Back in March, when they were doing 600,000 on first-time customers, they were spending nearly 300,000 on ads. And then they pulled this all the way back to 180. And so you can see a pretty one-to-one correlation between media spend and first-time customer revenue. If we then move into June, they declined even further. They pulled ad spend back even further. So they're kind of in this spiral of pulling spend back, which is pulling revenue back. And then in August, this is when the agency joined. These are the numbers that we just looked at halfway through the month. Now, what you'll actually notice is that profit contribution turns positive. Looking at the 3 months in which this agency was active, these were the 3 most profitable months on this entire P&L that we're looking at. Really counterintuitive to the title, the thumbnail of this video, and the way that I opened it up, right? I've opened it with the traffic campaigns are terrible, but in this instance, this agency actually seemed to have done a decent job. Now, there's a few reasons as to why profit contribution went positive here. Number one is that spend was pulled back on spend that was likely not incremental. And so spending $150,000 clearly was unnecessary, and a lot of this revenue was getting driven regardless from organic. And so this decline just allowed for an immediate flow through into profit contribution. Now, there's another argument here that there's a time to purchase with these products. And so all of the conversion-based campaigns that had people in middle of funnel in June were still following through and buying in August, despite the spend cut. And we know this is true for most brands because you can cut spend by 50 to 60% tomorrow, and your revenue won't decline by 50 to 60% if you have long customer purchase journeys, because everyone that's in that journey, there'll be a delayed purchase that occurs. And so you always have to factor in for a delay in that purchase cycle. Now, okay, well, we should have seen that then hit in September. And you kind of do in September, August. And so they decline in August by about 15,000 in revenue. And then in September, they somewhat maintain because sales introduced and some other things are done to maintain revenue. And then it declines further in October. And they go to the lowest revenue that they've been at for the past 2 to 3 years. This is also in combination with the lowest spend in the last 2 to 3 years. And so this is a negative spiral that they're getting into where they're having to continue to pull spend back, likely due to in-platform returns or some other kind of metric that they're holding themselves accountable to, because it's definitely not acquisition MER. If they were scaling based on acquisition MER here, they should have been increasing spend substantially, right? This is some of the best acquisition MER figures that they've seen in years. But they were likely indexing based on in-platform reported numbers. Now, from here, the business switched back to conversion-based campaigns. Okay, so the agency was active from August 15 to October 15, which is only a 2-month period. And so there were 2 months of traffic campaigns in here. This was only half a month of traffic. This was a full month, and then half a month of traffic. And so we unfortunately don't get enough of a crack at the strategy to get like really clear data, but we can see the impact it had after that was applied. And so the accounts are switched back to conversion-based bidding, optimizing for sales, and revenue declined to 130 in December, 180, 250, 167, 170, and has continued to decline after. Now, this isn't just an issue with traffic campaigns, but it's a really interesting case study in showing that traffic campaigns were run here for about 8 weeks. And the logic of traffic campaigns is that it has a positive impact over the long term because we're generating a bunch of new clicks, and then these people will convert down the line in a conversion-based campaign in bottom of funnel. And we saw the exact opposite in this case. And spend was increased back up. And so obviously spend was pulled back, it was taken back up, and revenue wasn't able to follow. Now, what's even more interesting is when we pull out the returning customer P&L. Because when you look at these numbers, you should be thinking to yourself, why did this brand fire the agency? Because if they're looking at P&L numbers and they're looking at revenue, this actually isn't that bad. Now, they might have been in dire straits and they needed a really quick revenue increase, and there might have been poor expectation setting. The agency might have said that they could take them to $500,000 within 30 days and they didn't. But let's be realistic here and just go, well, their profit contribution went positive, right? If this was a client of ours, I would show them the P&L and go, this is the first time that you've had positive profit contribution on acquisition in 2 years' time. This is a win. This is the definition of success. But this is where it gets really interesting. They had heavy audience exclusions on existing customers across all campaigns. And what this business ended up seeing on the returning customer P&L is that they were doing $600,000 on the returning customer P&L back here. And so they were doing about $1.2 million a month online. This was declining in conjunction with the first-time customer P&L declining, which is a general indication that this is a merchandising issue and not actually an acquisition issue. But regardless, we watch this decline, and then as this agency joins, it drops $50,000 in a month. It then drops another $50,000 and then maintains there. And so they lost $50,000 in net revenue on returning customers. And that really hits profit contribution because there's no direct marketing expenses associated with this acquisition. And so what you end up seeing here is that profit contribution from returning customers drops from 190 to 150. You feel that almost straight down to the bottom line. And that 50K decline, even though they had an increase here of 20K, net, they were down substantially. And so they were probably negative cash flowing during this period once we layer in operating expenses. Now, was this necessarily due to heavy audience exclusions? It's hard to say, but the second that they took the audience exclusions off, returning customer revenue jumps back in November. Now it is November, so you have to take that with somewhat a grain of salt. And then returning customer revenue never comes back to numbers that they were previously at. So I think there's really 2 lessons here. Lesson number 1 is that traffic campaigns still, in my opinion, do not work. I still haven't seen a conclusive piece of data that has proven that that campaign type will drive long-term performance. And once again, you might look at this and go, well, it drove short-term performance. And yeah, it kind of did. But we couldn't see that in any attributed numbers, which does make me a little bit concerned. And I think that this increase in profit was really just due to a cut of spend. And we were just seeing flow through revenue on purchase journeys. And it's a 6 to 8 weeks of murky data, so it's not incredibly clear. And then number 2 is that the traffic campaign thesis is that you see revenue lift down the line because you're driving a bunch of top of funnel traffic now that will then buy 30, 60, 90 days later. But we saw a massive decline in customer acquisition despite spend going back up after this traffic strategy was ran. And I would probably draw correlation there. The second big learning of this video, in my opinion, in this case study of this business, is heavy audience exclusions. You need to be careful on businesses of this size. And so you need to be able to monitor the returning customer P&L and the first-time customer P&L in isolation, and make sure that if we are going to go and introduce heavy audience exclusions into an account that's never had it before and is very reliant on $500,000 a month coming from returning customers, we need to make sure that there isn't a decline here. And then if there is a decline, we need to really consider increasing budget allocation a little bit to existing customers on the platform. Now, I'm a big proponent of not spending on existing customers on the platform. I cannot stress that enough. Meta and Google are for new customer acquisition. But if you're doing $1 million a month or $500,000 a month on returning customer revenue, got to be careful. Okay, a lot of these people technically are lapsed. And so these are people that bought 2 years ago and then they're repeat buying now. Yes, we've defined them as a returning customer within this P&L, but are they really returning? Probably not. And so we just need to be really careful on businesses in the 8 to 9 figure range on heavy audience exclusions. Still do them, but you need to be more thoughtful and you need to track the data a lot better to make sure that you aren't having a negative impact here. Because it's my guess that, in fact, I'd say it's very, very likely that this agency wasn't tracking first-time customer P&L data and returning customer P&L data, and they just couldn't substantiate their strategy. Whereas if they actually split this up, the action items moving forward would be that the strategy kind of seems to be okay. Like, at least with just that data in real time, you'd be thinking, okay, things aren't too bad. But the returning customer P&L is declining precipitously. And so we need to go and take our audience exclusions off. And we need to actually maybe put some budget into existing customers. That would have been a good rectification within this strategy in mid to late September, in which I think it would have been substantiated for this agency to continue running this account, which I wish they did, because it would have been really interesting if we had more data here on a long-term traffic-based strategy and how that would have impacted the P&L.